Hello, welcome to the 2018 Future City Educator Best Practices and Advice webinar hosted by Future City Headquarters. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very glad to have you with us. Before we get started, if I could just get a hand raise, get a couple people to click on the hand raise button, just to make sure that you can hear me clearly and that you can see the screen that says Future City. It has September 27th on the page. Great, thank you very much. Excellent. My name is Jake Williams. I'm the program coordinator for the Future City competition. Also on the line is Maggie Dressel. She's the program manager for Future City.
Hi,
She's going to
everyone.
be Hi, Maggie. She's going to be staffing the question box today. So as we go along, feel free to type in any questions that you might have as we go. So on this webinar today, we have educators and mentors from nearly 40 different Future City regions all around the US, not to mention a number of international regions as well. So whether you're calling from California or Kansas, New York City, North Carolina, Nigeria, China, Canada, or anywhere else, you are part of the Future City community. Some of you watching this have been participating in the program for literally decades, and there are many others who this is your first year. So either way, you probably know that Future City is an amazingly fun program that's transformative for about 40,000 middle school students every year. And you also know that Future City is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, and it takes planning, and it takes organizing to get the most out of this program. So throughout the year, Maggie and I at Future City headquarters and all of the regional coordinators who run the local competitions try to make the program as accessible and user-friendly as possible for each educator and mentor. One component of this is a series of educator advice webinars. So this past May, we had a webinar where we introduced the basics of Future City. And if you're brand new to Future City, or you're just looking for a refresher about each of the deliverables and some kind of general overview of the program itself, then I would definitely recommend checking that out. You can watch the recording of that webinar in the resources section of futurecity.org. And today, we have two fantastic guest panelists. They're experienced Future City educators who will be discussing the program in even more depth. So based on comments and questions that came out of the May webinar and some other places as well, we're going to dive into some best practices and advice from these seasoned Future City educators. Before we get started, I just wanted to note that we're using GoToWebinar. If the sound quality is not great over the computer, there's a teleconference line that you're welcome to dial into. The information is on the screen now if the computer sound isn't great, and this information should be in your webinar control panel too. This webinar will also be recorded and will be posted in the futurecity.org resources page in the next couple days. As I mentioned, we would be thrilled to have questions from you. We want this to be an interactive webinar. So feel free to type in any questions or comments into the question box on the webinar control panel. Maggie will respond to some as we go if they're directed to Future City staff. And for questions for our educators, we'll pose those questions, as many of them as we can, to the panel at the end of the webinar. So now I'm very excited to introduce our two panelists. We are thrilled to have two excellent Future City educators with us today. Tracy Tashian is an extension agent for the University of Kentucky. She works in the 4-H and youth development area with students in grades 1 through 12, both in class and outside of the classroom. She has participated in Future City for 5 years. Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us is Travis Kopel. He's an 8th grade science and STEAM lead educator and specialist at Justice Page Middle School in Minnesota. Justice Page is a Minneapolis public school and Travis has been participating in Future City for 8 years. Thank you very much for joining us, Travis.
My pleasure. Hello, everyone.
So let's get right into it. The first question is for Travis, and this one of the great things that you might know about this program is it's very adjustable to a lot of different educational situations. So first off, Travis, could you just briefly describe how your Future City program functions? Where do you meet, and how regularly does your team or teams meet?
Sure. I'm very fortunate enough to have the support of my school administration. I'm able actually to lead Future City as an elective class during the school day. In my schedule, I meet with the classes on an every other day basis. So I have a total of 2 sections, approximately 70 students, where I will go through and work with those different students again on the every other day basis. For setting, we, again, with the support of our building, we meet in various locations, including my classroom, the school computer lab, school library. Our school is also fortunate enough to have a maker space, so we can use that space to assemble models, try different problem solving solutions out and see what happens. I also get full school days, again, with the support of my administration, full school work days before the competitions, regionals for sure, and if we're lucky enough to go to national, or we're able to go to nationals, we have that work time as well.
Excellent. And Tracy, the same question for you. Your teams are not from a school itself. Could you describe a little bit about the program that you run for Future City, how you meet, where you meet, and those kind of details?
Okay, sure. I work with a group of students that specifically are interested in science, engineering, and technology. And my group is significantly smaller. I keep my group to about 5 to 7 at the most students. And we meet at our office. I have an extension office, and it's very close to the school where the students that I work with attend. I pick them up after school and bring them to the office. We have the use of my computer. We also have several workrooms that we can store our materials, and I collect things over the year to use for the model. And if I need to use the middle school, our middle school principal is very supportive, and he allows me to use that space. I will pull the kids out of class if we have practice opportunities that they can go into the community. They're very good about allowing us to do that, as well as practice in front of teachers and so forth. But the majority of our work is done outside of school hours. And we typically will begin in the summertime and work clear up until the competition.
Excellent. Tracy, could you talk a little bit about how this came about, how you came to work on Future City in this way? How did you pitch Future City to your organization, or was it in existence before you got there? Could you just tell us a little bit about how that was developed initially?
Sure. I was very fortunate. I have close relationships with all of my principals, and actually one of my students, her mother learned about the competition because she's a teacher in another county, and they'd sent an email. At that time, I was working with gifted and talented students in the classroom, and she thought it would be an excellent opportunity for students here in Graves County. And I looked at it, and I was really scared at first, and I thought, I don't know anything about engineering. I don't know if I can do this, but I decided to just tackle it and see what would happen. And we have enjoyed every single moment of it. This was about 5 years ago. So I just sort of fell into it, and I had no idea it existed until they asked me about it. No one else wanted to take on the challenge, and I thought, well, I'll see if I can do it. And it turned into being one of the best things that I think I do all year, and by far one of my most favorite activities.
Excellent. Travis, how has your Future City program grown or expanded since you started it?
Well, this is the second school where I've led Future City. I did it for 4 years at my previous school and 4 years at my current school. At my previous school, I got a mailer one day in my mailbox, and I thought it looked interesting, and it was only $25 to sign up, which the school was okay with. So, and the program kind of grew to where we were able to, I was able to set it up as a multi-grade elective, so I could get students kind of rejoining it. How it's grown at my current site is, once again, when I came here, I had mentioned this as a program, as something, as kind of an elective, kind of an extra opportunity for students, but it wasn't really an elective. It was students were placed in the class. But as the program has gone, as we've found more success, as we've learned as we've gone, the program has gone to a multi-grade elective, to where instead of students are placed here, we're now actually up to a waiting list of students who want to be in the class, and we just don't have the space to do it. So the program has kind of grown, also with the huge support of the community. My school, when my school was established, it wanted to have a STEM or STEAM focus. That didn't work. That proved to be unsustainable with the original vision. But Future City kind of provided a new vision for what we could do. And using Future City as kind of a backbone, we've resurrected our STEM program now to include a whole bunch of facets, not directly tied to Future City, but all with Future City's help in making them happen. So Future City is kind of, not only has our Future City program grown, but our STEAM program has grown with Future City as kind of the backbone of it.
That's great, excellent. So one thing that is important to kind of think about, even either before you start working on Future City or as you're beginning to begin to work on it, is to think about what your goals are and your resources are as a Future City educator. They could be things like promoting independent learning, developing teamwork and delegation skills, expanding students' understanding of the topic material. You might be focused on providing a few kids a very specific opportunity or engaging as many kids as possible. And of course, you'll probably have more than one goal, and there will also be limited resources. But it's good to kind of think about these priorities in the early stages of working on Future City. So Tracy, could you talk to us a little bit, you mentioned it briefly, but could you tell us a little bit more about the size of team that you prefer to work with, and then some of the pros and cons to having a team that size?
Certainly. I do prefer to work with 5 to 7 students. Of course, that makes the workload significantly larger, but it does seem, because I basically am the one person that works with my group, it's much more manageable to have a smaller group of students. And I haven't had a lot of issues with arguments and getting along and things like that with a smaller group. Also, it enables me to give stronger support to those 5 or 7 students that are involved, and it's enabled them to develop one of my big focuses for kids is their ability to speak in public and to answer questions and to think quickly on their feet. And that, when you talk about goals, that's always been one of my goals, because I see that as something that students need practice in. And so the schools oftentimes don't have the time to do that with all the other standards that are expected to carry out. This Future City allows me to give students that opportunity, and the 5 or 7 students that I'm working with do master those skills. So I'm very proud of that. Again, as I said, it is very difficult. You have to have students who are dedicated. You have to have parents who are supportive, because there's a lot of outside homework that I require my students to do. They have to go home and do some of the work on the rubrics, and they have to do a lot of the work outside of the meetings that we have, because there are so few of them. So there are definitely advantages. I've never had a large group, so I can't really say that, speak to the advantage of having a large group, although I'm sure there are some. I just know for me, and the transportation issue as well, if I'm transporting them from place to place to practice and do different activities, I don't have a way to get them places. So that's my reasoning for having a small group.
Mm-hmm. And briefly, Travis, could you let us know what size team or teams you tend to work with?
Sure. Since I do this as a school class, again, I'm leading this with anywhere from 55 to 70 students, just depending on the year. But what I do is those students will each set themselves up into teams of 4 or 5. I find that this 3 students it's too much work for not enough people. Once you get beyond 5, they honestly spend more time arguing than they do getting anything done. But I did have a team of 6 last year. We were fortunate enough to go to nationals. That team was just simply a strong group of young ladies who made the 6-person thing work. So I also prefer these smaller teams. The idea of one class, one team I had a hard time with it, because there's people who the rest of the team, because it's a class environment, they don't feel the buy-in if they're not personally involved in the competition aspect of it. So the one class, one team. Now I'll get other students to help the competition teams once that time comes, but essentially it turns into, this year I have 14 teams across the 2 classes. The first decision is who wants to go to competition and who doesn't. Some of the students are interested in what we have to teach, but not so much the competition side of it. Then we have students who are interested in both. So first I narrow it down that way. Then the first deliverable, which is the SimCity, they have to have their slideshows completed And then I use the slideshow. I take the 3 best slideshows as the kind of determining factor. And as we'll mention a little later, I also have students begin the essay at the same time as the SimCity. So I also use the progress on the essay as a benchmark of what teams are really in it, putting in the extra work, really want the competition as their goal, and which ones are doing well, but the competition is maybe kind of second on their list. Really, I just try to take the strongest teams that I can, and it takes a lot of student work for them to prove that that's what they want to do. And as far as establishing goals, again, the public speaking is a great one. And then for our students, really every deliverable, the multidisciplinary focus on it. So I try to focus our goals on not only the theme and the engineering of it, but having each individual discipline, math, science, social studies, language arts, public speaking, art, trying to build as many of those into the project as I can so they kind of get an immersive all-around experience.
Excellent. And just as a reminder, different regions sometimes have different restrictions or rules about the size of a team or how many teams a single school can bring to a competition. So it's always a great idea to check with your own local regional coordinator just to confirm what the rules and requirements are in your own region. Tracy, how are roles determined for your team? Does every student work on every component, or do you divide it up?
Well, with such a small number, they do all work on most components. If I do have a stronger writer, I will have that person take the lead on the essay. But they're all, at this point right now, they're all working on SimCity. When we get to the presentation part, they all have input on that, putting that together and organizing that. And then they all certainly work together on the model. So it's a team effort all the way around. We start working on our essay early. That way we have that done. We have an idea of exactly what the way our model is going to be laid out. We don't really start our model out until a little bit later, what most people would consider is later, because we try to get it defined where we don't have to redo a lot. And I found that was kind of a learning curve for me. When we first started, we had redone so many aspects of the model. It was crazy the first couple of years. And then I decided, I think it was year before last, that we would have a definite plan, and it worked pretty well. So it's pretty much equal as far as if I do have a student that's stronger with SimCity and really enjoys that part, they'll work on that. But right now, this year, it varies. But this year, my girls that are working on it, they're working on it equally, because it's not something any of them are very passionate about. And to be honest, they're struggling more with SimCity than they are with the essay. So it varies from year to year, but I would say with the numbers that I have, we do divide the work evenly.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Travis, you mentioned briefly that sometimes, depending on the size of the team, that can have an impact on arguments or disagreements between team members. Regardless of the size, how do you address conflict between team members when it comes up?
So the way that I generally will respond to it is kind of get everyone together. I would kind of mediate the argument. The team that I had last year, just as a quick story, they did everything through Google Drive because they were so occupied with other activities, and they would be logged into their essay at 10 o'clock at night, and the comment section was one big running argument about one thing or another. So they really did use that. So then when I would see them the next day, if I'd read through all of them, and if they hadn't kind of settled it on their own, just kind of get everybody together and say, I read through the comments, we're having this conflict. What is a way we can build in everybody's ideas, or at least come to something that everybody can agree on? Most of the time, I have found that teams will generally work these things out on their own. The teams who are really into the competition and really want to kind of take it to that next level, they'll recognize that conflicts happen, but they'll work it out on their own. If I do need to intervene, it really is a matter of getting them all together in the same space. It may be outside of class time, maybe during their lunch or something. Just again mentioning, I've read your arguments. All of you have your own strong opinions. How can we work this out? And again, those students who are dedicated to the project, and I have them choose their own teams, so they're generally all friends, and then they just kind of work it out on their own, and then we can move on from that. And we did have some arguments last year that continued the whole way through, but we at least came up with something that everybody could live with. It may not have been their first choice, but everybody had something by the end of it that they could all agree to. So that is one thing that I have found that I don't want to say I encourage them to argue, but when they argue, some of their best ideas come out of some of the arguments that they have with each other. So unless it gets too heated or it goes to, a place that is uncomfortable or unsafe, then I will kind of let them work it out as best I can.
Can be a good opportunity for learning negotiation and debate skills, as well as STEM.
Correct. The loudest voice is not always the right voice.
Tracy, what types of assignments do you assign your team members? Do you incorporate components of the rubric or different lesson plans into homework?
Yes, I use the rubric as the Bible, and they are expected to answer all of the questions and answer them in a way. We'll take apart the city essay rubric, and right now they've all been assigned to answer the ways that how they would incorporate answers into that essay. And then I will have them research. We go over all of the basic power systems, no matter what the theme is. Because a lot of times I'll have completely new members, and I don't have a lot of returning members. And I will assign them to research power, research water, research gas and wind and solar and all of the different types of energy that we use right now and all the different types of infrastructures, and even to go so far as to do interviews with people in the community and come back and report what they found to each other. And then again, I use that rubric. I use the manual. There's a lot of good resources in that handbook. I used it more when I first started because I was so green when didn't know a lot about it myself, but there are very good resources in that book that I do go back to when we're struggling with, for instance, scale. That lesson is an excellent one. I had downloaded it from the first year, and I think it's still in the manual. It's an excellent one. It's on the website, and that one is great. A lot of the activities are engaging for the kids, and they enjoy the fun part of it. We do a lot of brainstorming activities. Those were some that were recommended in the manual as well. So I'd incorporate a little bit of everything in our work that we do.
Excellent. Great. Now I'd like to jump ahead to the team communication component, which is very important. Travis, how do you encourage good, positive communication between your team members?
As I mentioned, Google Drive has been a lifesaver with our students, and our school is pushing 900 students, so all of them are involved in a bunch of different things, and there's just so many of them. Google Drive becomes a great opportunity for them to communicate back and forth. It also allows me and our engineer mentor to monitor their progress because I require that they do everything in Google Drive. That way myself and again our mentor and all of them can keep track of what's going on with it. And in the past, the school where I was at previously, computer access was an issue. So students really had to, again, maximize that in-school time. They were coordinating get-togethers at the library, times outside of school, lunch times, before school, after school, really trying to make that happen. Again, email. One of the things I require every student to give me their email address that they'll actually answer, so I can communicate back and forth with them with email. I can email different resources that I find, or they can email me with we found this interesting, but we don't totally understand it. I know I've heard some people who have used social media as a way to coordinate teams. I haven't really delved into that. I see the value in it, but Google Drive and just the old-fashioned face-to-face is kind of how we've always done it in the past.
And Tracy, what tools do you use to communicate for your team to communicate about their project?
My students all are friends, so that's a good thing. They're in the same school together, so they do see each other and they will talk. We talk on a regular basis, and we'll use email more than we don't use the Google Drive. We use emails back and forth to one another. They'll email homework to me. I'll compile it all together, and then we'll look at it. We all sit down together and review what everyone has responded and come up with what we feel like is the best as far as when we're doing big homework things like the essay, and putting together the presentation. That presentation we usually will devote about 3 days of just straight all day. It's during the breaks that we have, maybe Thanksgiving break or Christmas break. That's when we devote the time to writing those. So that's face to face. So I would say we do most of ours face to face. I'll start in October, and typically we'll meet practically every day to do the work that we need to get done.
Excellent. One of the very important components of Future City is the team mentor. The mentor is an official member of the team, and she or he is a STEM professional who acts as a role model and kind of offers a window into the professional world of STEM. Many mentors get involved because they know the students, so you can see if your students have parents or other relatives who are engineers or city planners or work in a similar field. If you don't have someone you already know, you can reach out to your regional coordinator for assistance getting paired with a mentor. So this question is for Travis. Do you have an official team mentor? And if so, how did you find your mentor?
We do have a mentor. I've been working with him for the last 7 years. My mentor, my first year, was a student and ended up getting so many things going on with school that he was unable to continue on with us. But my mentor was assigned to me when I had mentioned to my regional coordinator that my original mentor was no longer available. The second year, she put me in contact with my current mentor.
Great. And Travis, could you tell us a little bit about what their role is with the team? What do they actually do? And how often does your team meet with the mentor?
Sure. Our mentor, I can't imagine what our teams would have been. I attribute a lot of our successes over the years to our mentor. He is a civil engineer. He was also, when we came together, he was a former regional judge. So he had expertise in not only the civil engineering side, but also on the expectations for the regional competition. Another thing is he kind of reins in myself and the students to focus on best ideas. Oftentimes he will come up with these ideas and he will simply say, that's not possible, or in 1,000 years that's still not going to work. So he will help us to take a look at it more from a realistic point of view and kind of help us nail that down. Again, he is comment suggestion. He attends all of our competitions. He did join us in Washington, D.C. at Nationals. And as I always say, he's kind of our voice of reason. He really is the one who, when I'm running 100 miles an hour and he'll just simply say, you realize that that's not going to work, or did you realize that deadline is a week from now? And again, without his input and his expertise, I can't imagine where our team would be. So I'm very fortunate to have his experience. And again, as a civil engineer, and he meets with us more. As fantastic as he is, technology is not his strong suit. So he doesn't join us a lot for the SimCity part. But when we get into the essay, the model, and the presentation, he is with us. He will come over once, sometimes twice a week. Because I'm on an every other day, he kind of has to come twice a week to see everybody. And given his specialty and our location here in Minnesota, he works a lot concrete engineering and road projects. And because everything here freezes solid, starting in November, right around the time the SimCity wraps up, he's a lot more available to us as his workload kind of lightens. And he really does come over as often as his schedule allows.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to be sort of flexible with for mentors who have a day job with fitting into their already tight schedules. And just as a reminder for educators who do have a mentor, it's a great idea to encourage your mentor to register on the Future City site. If they register as a mentor with your team, then they can access the materials and resources that you have from your educator account, things like the scores for your team, uploaded deliverables, those kind of materials. If you pair, those accounts can be paired. So we encourage mentors to register if they're not already. The next question is for Tracy. If you don't have an official mentor, are there other ways you can introduce your team to the work of STEM professionals? For example, what types of unofficial or temporary mentors do you introduce your team to?
When we're in our planning stages, we will visit many of the engineers. I live in Calvert City and I work in Graves County, and Calvert City is home to many, many plants, and there are many different types of engineers that work in those plants, and we will go and visit them, especially when it comes time for the presentation, and get their feedback and get their input on answering our questions. We've also been known to invite different engineers to come in and work with the kids when they have ideas. A lot of times it will be a parent of a child that, a child's friend's parent that would come in and work with them. So most people, I find that most people are willing to help more sporadically. I've not found anyone that has the time to devote to being a full-time mentor. So I will reach out to individuals on a short-term basis and get their input, which they're much more apt to be able to do. So that's how we handle that situation.
Excellent. Yeah, those types of resources are really invaluable. Travis, what types of people, organizations, companies like this do you reach out to as a resource for your team?
Sure. Again, my school, the sheer size of my school and the popularity of our program has opened a lot of doors for this over the past few years. Just this year, I just through our school newsletter and our school social media, I put out a call for anyone in our community with ties to engineering or city planning, even community organizing and things like this. And I got a flood of responses. The Interstate 30 or I-35W runs straight through Minneapolis, and it's currently going through a 4-year rebuild. And through different connections in my school community, we were able to establish a long-term partnership with the Minnesota Department of Transportation and some of the different engineering firms and outreach organizations involved in the project. And since the project goes to 2021, this is kind of a long-term outreach for us. We've also I cold called our city councilman and our city mayor for our ward councilman for our area and the mayor of Minneapolis. And I explained what the project was, and they were really excited to come in and speak to us. And our city councilman is also, or was in his previous career, an electrical engineer. So all of this simply started by me putting something out just through school social media, school newsletters, simply saying, do you know anybody who is involved in engineering or city planning? And not really expecting to get nearly the response that I did, which is again now turned into partnerships with multiple engineering firms, the city of Minneapolis and the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So really it was just one simple outreach to what I thought would be a small group of people has kind of turned into a whole nother thing, not only for Future City, but for our building. Again, just how Future City has become the backbone to open STEAM and STEM education to our students. This is an example of one simple email about one project has led to all of this.
Excellent. That's great. One of the most important components, resources to be able to utilize is the program handbook. Tracy, how do you approach the handbook each year? What's your process for receiving the handbook and working through it, and what's your process for that?
I look through it, I read through it cover to cover, and then of course I focus on what the theme is going to be, and I introduce that to the children. Depending on if it's repeat people, they're familiar with how the handbook is laid out. If they're new people, then you know they don't know it all. I do have two new ones this year that they're just getting their feet wet, but it does become easier once you have some returning members and they kind of understand the layout of everything. I use, as I said, the rubric is, I follow it just to a T. That's your key, and I love the fact that there is a rubric. That's one of the reasons I love this competition so much, is because you know what's expected of you, and it's all right there in black and white, and you know that these are the things that you need to do to achieve this score. And so that I emphasize that very strongly with the students. We use all of the tips and hints that are listed as far as what to do in the essay and what to do with the presentation, and we follow all of those to a T. There's a lot of good information. I like the project planning guide. We use that. Of course, it's a requirement, but we do, that helps the kids to get an idea of how to work through something with the logical steps rather than just jumping in and going in all different directions. It kind of reins them in. But typically we follow the handbook. And I really like the website with all the additional resources as well. So I would encourage anyone new or returning to really follow that handbook, because it will give you everything that you need to understand what is expected of you.
Great. Another question for Tracy. Do you use the gallery section of futurecity.org? There's the resource section. There's also the gallery section, which has past teams' presentations, videos of the presentations, and copies of past year's essays. Do you use the gallery section? And if so, how do you use it with your team?
Yes, we have printed off the essays from the past winners, and I have required them to take those home as homework and to come back and let me know what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it, what they could see, just learning writing styles and what is expected as far as the difference in writing an essay like this versus what they're writing in school, because there's a big difference. The research part, I want them to fully understand how much research is involved in writing these essays. And so we pay close attention to the bibliography, you know, the works cited pages for all of the different teams that have placed, because I feel like if you can learn from those that are doing much better than you, then that's the way to go. I really have enjoyed watching the different presentations. It gives the kids a chance to see, if they've never done it before, what's going to be expected of them. That part is it's such a wonderful challenge for the kids, because you have to make it entertaining, but yet you have to include so many pieces of information, and you have to make that time guideline, and there's really no way to understand that without seeing it done. And it's easy because you can push pause and say, see, this is how they did that. This is the way. Do you see the way they explain the different roles of engineers? Do you see the way they talked about the engineering process? All of those things are so key in that presentation, and for that resource to be there for the kids to be able to refer to is just, it's wonderful. So definitely I do use that gallery.
Great. Travis, how do you use the rubrics? The rubrics are available in the resources section. They're also in the program handbook, and these are the exact same rubrics that the judges use in the competition. How do you approach the rubrics, and what do you do with them with your team?
So I will print a copy of the program handbook, and all the rubrics, a lot of the essay outline, a lot of the suggested pages, I will put them on my teacher website here at school, so students can access them here at school, at home, really anywhere they have access to the internet. And as we start working through the different deliverables, I go through I mention quite frequently that the rubric is your guide. Of all those different things I've put on the website, those will get you started, but the rubric is what comes down to the end result. So as I said, as we use Google Drive, as I go through their different things, I will frequently make comments that referring them back to the rubric, saying things like, be sure to check the rubric for what's expected here, and have them go back and add to it that way. So making it accessible, easily accessible to them, frequently referencing them back to it. And this is another area where our engineer mentor, again, is very helpful, being a former judge, as he can kind of say, yep, this is the exact thing that when I was a judge, I looked at this too, kind of reinforcing the importance of those rubrics.
Great, excellent. So now moving into the specific deliverables, which is something everyone is always very interested to learn more about and discuss. We've talked a little bit about the project plan and how they can be a really great planning tool, as well as, you know, being a deliverable itself. And we've discussed some of the technology that you know, sometimes people have used Google Sheets, Google Drive, or simply email to kind of work on their project plans together. Tracy, can you tell us just a little bit about how your team comes up with their goals for the project plan?
We base our goals on whatever the city theme is, or the theme for the year, and we try to incorporate that part because that's the driving force behind whatever we're doing that year. That's our major goal. Whereas this year it's developing the power grid that can withstand the disasters. That, you know, that's our goal, and we try to be as specific as we can and include, in this year's we're including the different disasters that we're dealing with, and we use that as our guide for the whole entire project. and not just as something. I try to get them to see the value in planning ahead rather than trying to do this after the fact, and writing down the things that you're learning as you go along, because that I feel like is important for them to be able to reflect back on. And we're trying to do better with keeping journals, and that way we have the answers to the questions that they're asking later on. I'll be like, well, that's something you might need to include in your journal. Somebody will have an aha moment, and I'll say, write that down, because you're going to be asked what you learned either on the project plan sheet, or when you're standing in front of the judges, they may ask you a question about what you had learned, and it's good to have that already captured on paper. So we do it by hand. We meet together and do it and compile. I'm the note taker, and we just go round table and they give me their input, and I record, and then we compile it all together. And I generally am the typist, and we'll type it up, and we'll do it that way when we meet at different times at different check-in points.
Great, excellent. One of the most exciting and fun, and also one that can be difficult and have some bit of a learning curve, is the virtual city. Just as a reminder for those who are new, that the virtual city is comprised of the students working on a sim city, which is not necessarily their actual competition city, but sort of just a prototype, a place where they can learn about managing a city budget, or the overall design of infrastructure. They can learn some of the overall skills that are involved with successfully running a city. And they set up some goals for themselves. And the purpose of the virtual city, they create a slideshow following a template that's provided by Future City, and it shows how they worked to achieve those goals. It's not absolutely necessary that they achieve the goals themselves, but that they demonstrate how they worked toward achieving them. So Travis, what is your process for downloading SimCity onto computers? Do you use school computers, personal laptops? What's your process for that?
This is actually, as of this week, we've had a few interesting challenges with the virtual city. Because we are doing it through the school day, we have been using one of our school computer labs. The problem with using these school-based resources is many school district networks are set up to specifically not allow you to play games like SimCity, web-based, self-serving, long-term. Our district has something where I learned this today, this rolling delete that dumps what it deems as unnecessary files, and 2 weeks worth of work as of today got erased due to this rolling delete. So we have since, I had some old laptops lying around that I use for different tech applications. I downloaded the game onto the old laptops, which are not networked, to kind of solve this problem. I guess the thing is, what is the process for downloading it is the Future City website does provide information. If you don't feel like you are tech savvy, if you are in a situation where you have someone to provide IT support for you, provide that information to them. If you don't have that, attempt to seek someone out in your community. The tech requirements for SimCity, if tech is not your thing, the tech requirements can be pretty intense. So finding somebody who is familiar with all the different ins and outs of it can really make it easier. And again, Future City does provide resources, and I have to think that the regional coordinators, if you're in an area where finding IT support would be a challenge, I have to think your regional coordinator could put you in contact with somebody who could make that happen for you.
Tracy, what resources do you direct your students to if they have questions about SimCity or the virtual city deliverable? Oh, are you there, Tracy? I think you might be muted. Hi, Tracy, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm so
Thanks.
sorry. First, SimCity is not my forte at all. I will utilize students that have had experience with it in the past and let them teach each other. We are fortunate, I do have a laptop that they're able to take home and pass around. We have gone so far as to look on YouTube to see if we can find solutions to problems. We've had a couple of problems come up this year that I can relate to Travis losing things, because that has happened to us in the past, but since we do have our computer that we pass around, we haven't had that problem. We've had some other issues of things that I didn't even myself understand. So I will, a lot of times I have some teen mentors that are around that have done it in the past, and they will help the kids if they have questions on things that they can't figure out. But SimCity is certainly not my forte. That is one that I feel completely inept in. I do see the value in it, and I think that once they get the hang of it, they can understand it better. But I've just not had time to play around with it myself. So they have to depend on other individuals to help them with that aspect.
Mm-hmm. Good, very good. Travis, do your students jump right into working on the technical virtual city, or do you let them or encourage them to sort of play around and test out SimCity before beginning to actually work on the deliverable?
If I had students that are repeating the course, so they took it as 7th graders and now they're 8th graders, then I know that they've done it before and I'd let them jump right in. If they're students that either have trepidation about it or I know are not familiar with it, I will have them complete a practice city of 5,000 people. I will look to see that their budget is managed, or their budget is in the green, that all of their city utilities, essentially a micro version of a successful city, essentially proving that they know how to add the power, the water, the utilities, the roads, the regions, just to show some basic familiarity. The game does come in with the getting started tutorial, which I have found to be successful. And the website also has the SimCity tips and tricks document. It is really extensive, but for students who are really new to it, it is helpful to provide that information to them for them to kind of take home, read about it. We don't have a setup here where the students can play any SimCity at home because they're on school networked computers. The SimCity playing has to happen here at school. So a lot of the kind of the studying, Tracy mentioned the YouTube videos. We're also very big on those as well to help them get the hang of things. They retain their practice city as a kind of a place to try new things, to see what will work, what doesn't work, and kind of have a dummy city to experiment on, and then if it works, incorporate it into their competition city, and if it doesn't, a mental note of something to either get better at or try a different idea.
Mm-hmm. Great. Tracy, how do you approach the essay? How do you kind of begin to get started about it? Who actually does the writing of the essay? Do you encourage one single student to work on it? Do they all work on it at once and kind of collaborate together? What's the process for that?
Well, we will brainstorm and come up with our basis and our ideas for what we're going to do in the particular within the theme, and answering all the questions in the rubric of the essay is key. When they come up with ideas that they have, we research everything and make sure that we have a sound scientific basis, and that's when we'll incorporate our engineers. We'll run some things by them and see if this is actually going to be something that could happen in 100 years or even 1,000 years, as Travis said. If you have feedback from someone that says that that's just never possible, it's good to get that knowledge before you've written it into your essay, and then certainly tried to put it into a model. So that's the time when we get those answers. But they do all have input on the essay. I will typically have one strong writer in the group. That's just as how it works out. And that person will take the lead in the writing of it, with input and help from the others, because I don't feel like that's something that needs to be completely dumped on one child. And thinking about the essay, that's going to be the basis of your presentation. So everyone needs to have input and have knowledge of what's in the essay, because it drives the model and the presentation. So that one is the one that we really hit that one hard, because it's the basis of the whole contest, I feel like, and they're going to hold you to that when you get to nationals. It's going to be a thing of, does this line up with what you said in your essay, with what you have in your model, what you're doing in your presentation? So it's really important that all of those things, and the research basis. If they don't enjoy researching, it's going to be difficult for them to be a part of our team, because so much of what is Future City is research and showing that you can do the things that you are claiming or attempting to do. The 1,500 word limit is always a booger for us. we struggle with that. We try to include graphics that can cut words out if you can at all, because that's just always a challenge for us, is getting everything in the essay that is asked for in the rubric in such a, what seems to be a large amount of words, but when you're being very detailed, it's not that many words. But yes, to answer your question, everybody works on the essay, and I will have one writer that will kind of take the lead, but everyone else is expected to pull together and help out.
Excellent. Travis, besides yourself, does anyone else proof or review the essay? If so, whom?
Yes, so our engineer mentor definitely proofs the essay. I will also share it with our, we call it English language arts, but our reading and writing teachers, I will share it with them as well to provide their own input. Writing is a big focus in our school, so they will provide their own input as to, as somebody who is unfamiliar, essentially reading it as somebody who is unfamiliar with the information. So thinking that essentially if they can follow it, if they read the essay and it makes sense to them, not being science or engineering minded people, then we figure that we're off to a good start. And they also, again, they will use Google Drive where our essay is housed to comment to the students, to cross things out, to ask questions, and really push the students on the writing side of it. So that has been a great resource as well. In addition, students will I'll sometimes see their parents' names or their guardians' names pop up on the essay as they've just shared it with other people in their lives to go over it. And I encourage the students to share it with other people to get other perspectives. As the educator, I find myself reading over these essays so many times in the proofing stages that they all kind of start running together, and I start missing some things, some small things that can make a big difference. So having as many other people involved with the editing process as I can get kind of helps me catch on to things that I might miss.
Great. Moving on to the next deliverable, the most visual of the deliverables is, of course, the model. And as I think Tracy, you mentioned, you tend to start earlier with the essay. That's right, and then the model comes a bit later. And I think you mentioned it's a very good kind of thing to stress for, especially new educators, that the essay definitely informs the model. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
So another question for you, Tracy. Having an accurate expense form and keeping within the budget is very important. A very important part of the competition. The budget includes the model and any presentation or special award visual aids, costumes, things like that. How do you track your team's costs and ensure that they stay within budget?
Anything that we purchase goes in. I keep a folder. I have to save expense receipts for my job anyway, so I just have another folder that's marked Future City, and I'm the one that purchases everything. I don't have the kids purchase anything, so I have everything that's purchased in a file folder. When they start to bring in the junk, that's where I would get help from our regional coordinator. I remember the first year I had a lot of questions with how to price things, and since then I've kind of gotten the hang of it. But we will pick up things at yard sales, things at thrift stores, and so forth to keep our budget down. In years, it varies from year to year, but some years we'll spend more on our presentation pieces. I think this past year, we had to buy some wigs, and those were a little more expensive. So that cut into our budget for our model. So you just have to watch that, because there is that combined, it is $100. But as far as keeping receipts, we don't usually spend a whole lot because I save so much junk, and we do a lot of painting of different junk pieces. A lot of things are donated. Of course, even if they're donated, you have to attach some type of value to them, but it is significantly less than what it would be if you purchased it. So just keeping up, and we keep a running list of everything that's on our model, because I think in years past the question has been, tell us about the most interesting recycled part that was on your model. So we would always kind of have the kids know and remember, that's what that is. Remember, we painted that chewing gum box, and that's what that is. So yeah, I keep up with all of our receipts, and I don't have anyone purchase things. I'm the one that does all the purchasing, and we use a lot of recycled junk.
Mm-hmm. So one more question for you, Tracy. How do you talk to your team about scale? Is this a hard concept for them? How do you keep them
Yes,
consistently on scale when they're working on their
yes.
model?
I think the easiest time I had with scale was year before last when we were working with the Power of Space, our public spaces, and we had located a building in, I believe it was in Germany, that they had turned an air hangar. They had turned it into a entertainment center and indoor, and we actually got the dimensions of that, and we did the math to complete the ratios and set up a scale that would be, and that's what we'll do. If we find something that we like the size of, I'll have them use their math to convert that and come up with a scale that will work, because scale has always been another one of the difficult points for us, along with SimCity. So yeah, and again, there is a really good handout. It's not in the resource manual. I think it's on the website. It might be in some of the little research tabs or resource tabs you go through, that does have a worksheet. It's a packet on scale. And if you are new to that, I would encourage you to get that one, get that worksheet out. It's very basic, but it does at least give the kids an idea of what they're talking about when you talk about scale. There's also one where I think you design a room and you look at how you could scale down the size of a room, because it is a huge undertaking to think about putting an entire city on this small of a space and making it a realistic scale. So hopefully that's helpful to some people. But yes, when we could find an actual building that we wanted to incorporate in our city and we knew the actual measurements of it, we measured it using a ruler, and then we set up ratios and we're able to come up with a scale based on that way. So I think that's the most success I've had with scales.
Yeah, that's great to be able to bring that into a real world, so compare it with an actual building that the students can actually see pictures of. That's great. Travis, transporting the model to the regional competition and the finals in DC, if you win, can be very difficult. While your students are creating the model, do you make suggestions to them about how to make it durable enough to withstand transportation?
Yes, I do. I kind of jokingly say that if it can survive being transported through the building, it can survive transporting it to competition. Given our various workspaces, we often have to transport the model from one place to another. So that is often a good test of, can we get it from the third floor to the basement without breaking it? Also, I will go around periodically and shake what looks like the loosest piece, and if it falls off, I will say, all right, you got to find a better way to attach that. Hot glue does work wonders, but it's not universal, so we will try some different methods. Zip ties have been successful, but different ways to attach the various moving pieces to make sure that they can survive the transportation, because these models, especially at the competitions, move around a lot, so they really have to be able to withstand being transported across rooms, across tables, and then just the rigors of getting to the regional competition in the first place.
And Travis, do you have any people that you sometimes go to for assistance or advice about transporting the model?
I have transported the models in so many different ways over the years that I finally have a system that works. My engineer mentor and I have tried various different things, from city buses to U-Haul trucks, to we could never have students in our cars. In my first 4 years, having parents or guardians drive them just wasn't an option given our student population. So we tried U-Hauls, we tried city buses. At one point, my engineer mentor and I both had vehicles that could transport models. So that made things a lot easier, but we still had to recruit other adults to transport the students. My current situation doesn't have those problems. We have adults that can transport model and student at the same time. But that was definitely the ideal, of course, is to place the models in vehicles and have the students ride either in a caravan or in those same vehicles. But if that's not an option, again, it really just requires some creative problem solving too, and maybe a few phone calls to just find out folks who might be able to give you a hand.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Tracy, moving on to the presentation, the final deliverable. What's your process for determining which student will be, or which students will be the three presenters?
Well, I've done a variety of things. Sometimes there'll be students that just don't want to speak and the problem solves itself. Other times there'll be fierce competition, and typically I will ask them to learn a monologue, and it's anywhere from 3 to 4 minutes, and they will present that monologue, and I'll videotape them, and then I will let others, teacher friends of mine or coworkers, colleagues, judge, because I don't want to be in the middle of that. I have them to judge that, along with having them to complete the list of practice questions that will be asked, and have them participate in a question answer session with a panel of judges, because I want to have the child that's going to feel the most confident and that is going to work hard and be prepared. So,
Peter, go into the room 320.
so that's typically how we will do it. It's kind of an audition process, and sometimes it works itself out because a student will back out and not want to do it. And then other times it's determined by who's the best one. And thankfully I have other people that I can get to judge, and I don't get involved in the judging part of it.
Excellent. Travis, how do the previous deliverables feed into the presentation? How do you incorporate the work that all the students have done, for the months leading up to this, into the presentation itself?
Sure. First of all, my apologies. Our school day has just ended and our PA system is ear-piercingly loud. So I apologize again if that comes on as I'm answering this question. I'll try to be quick on the mute button if they start with the PA again.
No trouble.
But so as far as every part, as has been mentioned a little bit before, the essay really is kind of the SimCity does inform the essay, but the essay informs pretty much everything. So the way I look at it is the essay is essentially the presentation is turning your essay into something, is making your essay into a presentation, not just standing up there reading an essay. So I try to incorporate that. And one area that sometimes students will struggle with is the idea of using the model as the visual aid, referencing the model in the presentation. So this is something that we work on. We had a model last year that had switches on it. When we rehearsed, the room where we were rehearsing had a piano, but since the model wasn't done, they would hit the piano keys to remind them to hit the switches. So really kind of building in some of those different things, because as they get in front of judges, things kind of, they kind of will blank out on things. So, and then also, yeah, just reinforcing how every part of the model really does build into each one. And that's kind of why we do different parts of the model concurrently. So we try to have more than one part of the project being worked on at the same time. So that way they can internalize that connection by working on both, by working on multiple parts at multiple times. They can see how one part feeds into the other.
Very good. Tracy, how does your team practice their presentation? Do they perform in front of different groups of people? How do you encourage them to develop and strengthen their public speaking skills? I think you might be muted again, Tracy.
I'm so sorry. I don't know how that happens, but I apologize.
No problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, all good.
Okay. So I'm fortunate because in my county, I'm kind of known as the public speaking teacher. I'll go in and do speeches and demonstrations in all of the elementary schools. And so we've been fortunate. We go to City Hall and present in front of the City Council, and we present in front of the Fiscal Court. We also present in front of different boards, and then I will take them to visit different engineering firms during the weeks before the competition, the regional competition. And then if we're lucky enough to make it to nationals, we will find additional engineering firms that will allow them to go and practice. So I guess my philosophy is, and it's always been this way, no matter what competition we're in, I try to put them in the most intimidating situation possible before they get to the actual competition. And that way they're pretty much unintimidatable, if that's a word. They're prepared to the point to where they're confident. So, and because I never ever want a child to be in front of, to have a bad experience in public speaking. And so we do a lot of practice in the community, a lot of practice in different school settings, in front of different groups of school children, in front of different teachers, just anybody that will listen to them, we will practice in front of. And the kids, it's amazing. If you do incorporate this, I encourage you to do this, because the confidence, you can see the confidence build in them from the time that they do it. Each time they just get more and more confident. So that's the one thing that I would encourage everyone to do, even though it's terrifying. And it is terrifying for you, because these are your children. You've prepared them, but you can't do it for them. And just to see them, even if they're failing, it's what I've always said, if you don't do well in front of a group here, that's okay. This is home. These are people that know you, and it's okay. We want to do well in front of our judges, so we're preparing for that. So,
excellent, wonderful. Well, thank you both very much. If anyone in the audience has any questions that you haven't typed in already, you can type them into the chat box now for either Tracy or Travis, or both of them, or the Future City staff. Maggie, do we have any questions so far that have come in?
Yeah, we have a few. So we had Kristen ask, how do you encourage your students to think about kind of the future, not just what's happening now, but how do you really get them to kind of switch on that forward thinking?
Do you want to start that, Travis, and then Tracy can answer after that?
Sure. So get them thinking 100 years into the future. One thing that we've actually done is I've had students watch the series premiere episode of The Jetsons back from 1962, because that was supposed to be the world 100 years into the future. So we kind of look at that and we go through a list of, based on the first episode of The Jetsons, what is possible, or what's possible now, what might be possible, and what will never be possible. Kind of looking at it that way, so they can kind of take a look at thinking about, for instance, the fold-up car. Most of them will realize that, looking at it from what they've learned in science class, that the suitcase would have the same mass as the car when it started, and George Jetson just throws that on his desk like it's nothing. So kind of thinking about the never possible, but that is all. So then we also look at other views of the future, different animated shows, different television series, things like that, kind of looking at different points in history, what does the future look like? So they can kind of get an idea of, when you think about something that may not exist 100 years, when you think about something, well, there's no way that'll exist 100 years in the future, looking at something that, for instance, in the Jetsons, the idea of essentially FaceTime, where the television comes up and it's a screen and you can talk back and forth. And the idea that didn't take till 2062, that existed in your lifetime. The Jetsons also reference the music is coming out of a record player, because tapes, CDs, MP3s, none of that existed. So to tell somebody in 1962 that you could store thousands of music files and never have to carry a record player around, that's just astonishing to them. So it kind of helps them think about the problem of, wow, some things that we might think are impossible really aren't impossible if you kind of break it down. And it also goes into, it's amazing what engineers can come up with and how these ideas can grow so quickly once an initial idea has been established.
Great. Terrific. Tracy, do you want to add anything, or should we go to the next question?
I completely missed that. Something happened with my connection. So if you could repeat that question, I saw that I heard the end of what Travis said, but I'm not sure I heard that I knew what the question was.
It's just any tips on getting your students to think about the future, not just kind of what's happening now and the technology now, but how do you get them to think about 100 years from now?
Well, it kind of depends on the topic of what specifically they're looking at futuristically. We'll go on and do research, and our problem has been that sometimes we'll find things that we think are futuristic, but people are already doing them, but we'll put a spin on that. So I guess my best answer would be doing a lot of research. I like Travis's suggestion about the Jetsons. That's great. I hadn't even thought of having them watch the Jetsons. But and a lot of times my kids will just come up with off the wall things that do sound very futuristic, but we have to look and make sure that there's something that can actually be accomplished scientifically.
Great. Terrific. And somewhat related, we had a question from Millie, who is a new to Future City educator, and she has a small group of 6th graders, and was wondering if you have any tips on how to get them kind of motivated if they've never done Future City before, if they don't really know what it's about, and how fun it is. You know, we have all the resources and background activities that we offer in our handbook and online, but is there any other ways that you guys have gotten your kids excited about the project?
I have found success in bringing in people, just different engineers, different folks in city government, city planners, things like that, really allowing the students to see that this isn't just a fun project. It really does incorporate a lot of things, and it really is, it's a career for some people. So for them to see that this project is really cool, and here's a person who does this for a living, and they seem like they're on the up and up, then that kind of sees, it's a nice real world connection for them. They also get to see that engineers are not just this word that's thrown around in the Future City project, but they are real people that do real things that make cities and even the world itself a better place. So really establishing a real world connection between this project and, you know, the life that they lead and the things that they see in their daily lives. I think that's been helpful for me, for them to realize, oh wow, I never thought about what it took to make a street light work, the road planning, the electricity, the grid management, and all those things, just to simply make a street light go.
Great, terrific. And then we also had a question referring to when you guys were talking about your team formats. Kristen, a teacher, lets her students pick their own teams, but then there's always, you know, 1 or 2 kids that maybe don't have or aren't part of that friend group and end up kind of left out. What suggestions might you have for ways to, you know, include all the kids, not just letting them, you know, work with their friends? Any ideas?
In my larger groups, one of the rules for choosing your own teams is by the time teams are chosen, everybody needs to be on a team. So I don't let them establish teams if anyone's left out. Essentially, the rule is if anyone is left out, then I assign you teams alphabetically or at random, which none of them want. They all want to work with their friends. I also school community is also a huge focus of our building. So our students are very familiar with. They're very cognizant with empathy and not leaving students out. We have a few students who are part of our autism program, and our students here were super accepting of, yeah, please, we want you guys to be on our team. So it's been really nice. And again, if you have students who maybe don't look at it that way, again, the threat of I will choose if you don't choose well often has worked for me. I hate to threaten students, but it has led to, all right, we'll make sure everybody has a team. And then once they have the team and they realize that if you don't do this as a team, it's nearly impossible to do it well, they all realize that, wow, we really do have to work together in order to make this happen.
Great, good point. We have 2 more quick questions. One is pretty specific. Christina was asking, how many times per week do you to see your Future City students? Do you have a daily class with them, or how many times generally a week?
Well, we will start in the summertime, and we'll meet a couple or 3 times a week. And then as it gets into early fall, September, October, we do once a week. Well, August, September, we'll do once a week because school has started and they'll have homework. And then once we get into October, it becomes almost daily. And then November and December are pretty much almost daily as well, because we don't have in-class time. It all has to be done after school.
Great.
And for you know, those lots of educators who you know, would love to be able to have that much time, but they aren't necessarily able to meet every day. Do either Tracy or Travis, do you have any recommendations for educators who aren't able to meet as often as your groups are? Do you have any kind of things you would suggest they prioritize, or any recommendations for a group that can only meet not quite that often?
I would say, sorry, Tracy, go ahead.
I would say work on that essay. Devote whatever time you have to the essay. And if there's any way at all that you can farm out SimCity, that they do that on their own at home, and use the time that you do meet to really hit that essay hard, that's going to be the foundation for what you're doing next.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I can't stress that what Tracy just said is really what it is. The essay really is, it's this part the students might enjoy doing the least, but it really is the most important part of the entire project. And if there's any part to really devote most of that time to, it's the essay. Because with the essay, if you've got the essay under control, the model and the presentation are based on that essay. So instead of every deliverable starting over again, if you base everything on the essay, you do that huge chunk of work. For us, it's due in December, and then that leaves you free to, all right, well, we've done all the, now how do we turn I think turning the essay ideas into the model and the presentation is a lot easier than doing it the other way around of, all right, we've got this presentation and this model, and how do we write an essay around it? And I don't think you get the quality that you would get by using the essay as the backbone.
Great suggestions. We have one last question from Lakeisha. She's a new Future City educator with a homeschool group of 4 boys, and she was wondering, you know, sometimes teens will have really big, extravagant ideas. So how do you get them to kind of focus in on ideas, especially for a new group of students who have never done Future City before? Focus in on those ideas that are kind of easy to explain in the essay and show in the model.
The engineer mentor can help in this regard. A few years ago, when the theme was solid waste management, my students really got stuck on the idea of building their city on top of a reclaimed landfill. And our engineer mentor came in and said, from a civil engineering standpoint, I can't really think of a worse place to build a city. But they were stuck on the idea. So he worked with them extensively to plan how to vent out the methane, how to reinforce the foundation. And it turned out to be a really great thing. So having them focus in on those ideas, having the mentor kind of come in, because for myself, at least, I see these students during the day in kind of a middle school setting, and oftentimes I will tell them something and they'll just say, well, you just don't get it. Our idea is awesome. And we're in middle school, we know everything. Yep. So they will jump right in and just say, well, forget that. We're doing what we want to do. Having the mentor come in, somebody that kind of see as a project authority figure come in and say, yeah, what you came up with, your teacher was right. That's not possible. So let's either make it possible or let's come up with something better.
Exactly. If you can get someone else to back you to come in, because yeah, you develop these relationships with these kids, and when they lose a little bit of respect because they think that they know you so well that they know everything. So yeah, definitely, Travis, that's great. Get other input.
Great. Those were most of our questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, we are a bit over time, so we'll just finish up this last bit real quick. If you haven't already, make sure that you register for the 2018-19 season, futurecity.org/register, or click on the register button at the top of the main page. And of course, always, we encourage folks to share this and promote it with their colleagues and friends as well. The upcoming webinar next week is our annual theme webinar, where we'll be hearing from 3 professionals who'll be discussing the topic this year. Be discussing power grids and resiliency, and it'll be a great way for the whole team to get together, watch the webinar, begin to get some ideas about the challenge this year, and kind of jumpstart their research. We'll be sending out a reminder the next couple of days with the login details again, but you can mark your calendars for October 3rd at 4 p.m. Eastern is the theme webinar. And I just wanted to say a very big thank you to Tracy and Travis. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your recommendations and advice and experience with all of us. It's greatly, greatly appreciated. If anybody, any attendees have any questions or comments or anything, feel free to send them to info@futurecity.org. And other than that, good luck with your work, and we look forward to seeing you at the Future City competitions. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.